So again, this one follows on from the previous one about marriage. Unfortunately, sometimes, according to estimates, statistics, 42% of all marriages will end in divorce. And then people remarry. And so what we need to look at really are the rules around divorce and remarriage. And again, it's going to be different for different churches. So really one of the things we would explore really is why do marriages fail. They fail for many different reasons. There is not one particular reason, as you can see from the book. Life is difficult, life is hard, and things don't sometimes turn out the way you thought they were going to turn out. And so therefore people end up getting divorced. Now, it's a really important point to make here. Divorce is a legal ending of a marriage. And that is really, really important. It's not two people separating. Within the Catholic Church, they're okay with people separating and living different lives, but in the eyes of the Catholic Church, they're still married. It's a legal ending. Marriage is a legal contract between two people. Divorce, therefore, has to be a legal separation between two people. Okay, so now Christians, they want to balance out about being compassionate. They want to balance out about supporting people who are going through difficult times while holding on to the sacredness of the sanctity of marriage, that it being a sacrament. And so they will have different viewpoints really on how they're going to respond to the whole concept of a couple getting divorced and remarrying. Okay, so when you've got a quote there, if anyone who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery against her, and if she divorces her husband and marries another man, she commits adultery. So that seems really quite straightforward, that remarriage isn't going to be acceptable, and a lot of people use that quote to justify not remarrying anybody. But the Bible wasn't written in English, and that quote could easily mean, as part of the original language there in the Greek, in which it says that if a man divorces his wife in order to marry somebody else, then you have committed adultery. So in other words, if you are divorcing your wife, not because the marriage is broken down, but because you want to be with somebody else, you are committing adultery. The Bible, you could therefore argue that actually it's pretty silent. It's not clear cut that if you divorce your partner simply because the marriage is broken down and nobody else is involved, and then in the future you meet somebody you fall in love and want to remarry, that is a whole different scenario from divorcing in order to marry somebody else. So the church wants to keep the whole concept of marriage being sacred, because you have made vows in the presence of God, as we looked at when we look at the marriage vows. And so some people would say that vow should never ever be broken, and therefore it is permanent. And for the Catholic Church, that's the position that they take. Now, two people who are Catholics, they get married in the Catholic Church, decide to divorce, they can go to the law of the land and get a civil divorce. They are now legally not married to each other. They are now legally able to remarry. If you get married in registry office, they can do all of that. But in the eyes of the Catholic Church, they are still actually married to their original partners. So you can separate, you can get a civil divorce, but because you've made a vow in front of God, you are permanently married to that person. So therefore, if you then remarry, you are actually committing adultery in the eyes of the church, not the law of the land. The law of the land, they're fine. They're fine with you getting a divorce, a civil divorce, and remarrying as many times as you want. Okay, they do not put a limit on it. They don't put a moral judgment on it. That's just the legalities of it. But in terms of the Catholic Christianity, no, once you've got married and you've made those vows before God, that is it. It is permanent. You cannot get divorced within the eyes of the church, even if you have in the eyes of the law. But you can get an annulment. Now, these are under certain circumstances, as if it was never a true marriage. So maybe you were tricked into getting married, or the marriage was never annulled. Sorry, the marriage was never consummated. In other words, sex never took place within marriage. And there are lots of other reasons why. But you can get an annulment. So if you are able to get an annulment, then you are free to marry in the church. You're not getting married again because the first marriage was annulled. It's as if it never happened in the first place. Now, other Christians, they think, all Christians are going to think marriage is for life. Sounds like a prison sentence, but a marriage is for life. But they recognize that sometimes divorce is the lesser of two evils. Yes, divorce is not something they agree with, but equally, two people staying together in a toxic relationship is worse than the divorce. And so they see it as the lesser of two evils. Like I say, people get divorced for various different reasons. If your partner's committed adultery, you don't trust that person anymore, but you live in the same house and all of that, then the church would say, yeah, it's the lesser of two evils. If you want to get divorced, we will help you and support you and love you and all that kind of thing, even if they disagree with divorce themselves. But what if you're in a situation where you're being abused? Again, not the Catholic Church, but again, the church, other churches, the Anglican Church would say, yes, we disagree with divorce in principle, but it's the lesser of two evils. You need to get out of that toxic relationship. And so for many people, and this would be really on an individual basis. Some priests, some vicars don't have a problem with remarrying, others do. And so it will vary from priest to priest, vicar to vicar, whether how comfortable they are with remarrying. Some will just offer a blessing after a civil ceremony. Other churches, other Protestant churches, they're more than happy to have a remarriage, do another marriage ceremony. It will vary from church to church, because their argument would be, you've got two people, the first marriage didn't work out, we all make mistakes. So long as forgiveness is involved, we reflected on why the relationship fell apart, we ask God for forgiveness, and we allow people who have made mistakes the opportunity to find happiness in a second marriage. The Eastern Orthodox Church grants divorces, remarries couples, but usually not more than twice. I suppose their argument would be, okay, why are you remarried? What are you not learning from the other relationships? Why does it keep getting wrong? So I know that some people who remarry, they will have just a very small prayer within the ceremony where they are thankful for the good things that came out of the first marriage. They ask for forgiveness for the first marriage going wrong, and they acknowledge all of that. They're not hiding it, but then they acknowledge that they can move on. We all allowed a second chance. So clearly, Christians, because marriage is so sacred and so special for Christians, they want to do what they can to support people who are having problems with their marriages. And so lots of places they will refer to outside agencies such as Relate and Accord. There are lots of Christian counselling organisations that will work with couples to help them to try and keep them together in the marriage. Because it might be that two people, they still love each other, they still like each other. It's just that life is hard at times, and the financial pressures or the work pressures or family life just gets in the way of what those two people first fell in love with each other, and that happens. And so to try and work through those difficulties to help save the marriage is what a lot of churches will spend time putting time and effort into. But when it doesn't work, like I say, it will vary. The Catholic Church, they're the big no-nos. They're the big divorce, no. Never. Remarriage, no, because you commit adultery in the eyes of the Catholic Church. If you're remarrying, you are essentially asking us to bless your adulterous affair with this new person. And they are not going to do that. But other churches accept that you have divorced, accept that divorce is legal and final, and they accept forgiveness, and they accept that we can have second chances to try and find happiness in our life. We only have one life after all. So again, attitudes have changed tremendously over the last 30, 40 years. 30, 40 years ago, I mean, there's a big hoo-ha, really, when Prince Charles got divorced and then wanted to marry Camilla. And that was when lots of the laws were changing in the Anglican Church. And that really wasn't that long ago. That was, I think, in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I remember when I was doing my training, people were discussing about whether this should be allowed or shouldn't be allowed. So it was really only the last 20, 25 years, where society's changed so much in their viewpoint about people who are getting divorced and marriage. Now, in the past, it was seen as something shameful and you hide away, you brought this onto your family. Nowadays, it's seen something, yeah, it's sad, regretful, but hey, let's move on, let's move forward. It all depends really why the people have got divorced. I think you'll find that people have a very different response to people who got divorced. If it's because of work, money pressures, you just fallen out of love, or you got married too early, to somebody who's being abusive, or someone who had one of the partners has had an affair. People's attitude will also change depending on the reasons why the divorce is taking place. So the important thing is to remember: divorce is a legal ending of a marriage. An annulment is a Catholic Church ruling that the first marriage was never valid. Okay, so you're not remarrying, you're getting married for the first time within the eyes of the Catholic Church. And that for most Christians, divorce is seen as a lesser of two evils. Okay, because marriage for everybody is so important. It is meant to be a lifelong commitment, and therefore it is something that you enter into seriously and with a somber attitude. I think the Anglican Church in their marriage ceremony talk about it being a somber thing that you're doing, which seems a very strange word to use in a celebration of in a wedding day, but it's because it's meant to be a lifelong commitment. But hey, life isn't perfect and life throws its curveballs, and so the church has got different responses to it.